This is Translated Works. Timeless texts brought into clear modern language.
Crime and Punishment, Chapter 2. Raskolnikov wasn't someone who handled crowds well. As we've already seen, he avoided people whenever he could, especially lately. But now, all at once, he felt an urge to be around others. Something had shifted inside him, and with it came a strange thirst for company. After a month of concentrated misery and feverish thinking, he wanted, if only for a minute, to rest in some other world, any other world. So even in this filthy place, he was glad to stay in the tavern. The owner was somewhere in the back, but he kept appearing at the top of a few steps leading down into the main room. First, you'd see his boots, tarred leather with red tops, then the rest of him. He wore a long coat and a disgusting, greasy black satin vest, no necktie, and his face looked oiled over like a piece of metal. A boy of about 14 stood behind the counter, with a younger one running items back and forth. On the counter lay sliced cucumber, chunks of dried black bread, and chopped fish, all of it smelling rotten. The air was stifling, thick with alcohol fumes. 5 minutes in, it could make a sober person feel drunk. Sometimes you meet a stranger and feel their presence immediately, before they've spoken a word. That was the effect of a man sitting a little distance away, someone who looked like a retired clerk. Raskolnikov noticed him at once. Later, he would remember that first impression, and even think of it as a kind of warning. He kept glancing at the clerk, partly because the clerk was staring at him too, openly, insistently, like he was waiting for an opening. The clerk looked bored with the people around him, as if he knew them too well and despised them for it. He carried himself like someone who still believed he belonged to a better class than the drinkers in the room. He was over 50, bald and grizzled, medium height, thick set. His face was bloated from constant drinking and had a yellowish, even greenish tint. His eyelids were swollen, but behind them his reddish eyes shone sharply, like narrow slits. There was something unsettling in him, intensity, maybe even intelligence, yet also a flicker that looked like madness. His clothes were just as ruined as he was. An old black dress coat hung off him, missing every button but one, and he had fastened that single button like it was his final claim to dignity. A crumpled shirt front, stained and spotted, stuck out from his rough vest. Like a clerk, he wore no beard or moustache, but he hadn't shaved in so long that his chin looked like stiff grey bristles. Even so, there was something oddly official in his manner. He couldn't sit still. He kept raking his fingers through his hair. Sometimes he dropped his head into his hands, elbows planted on the sticky table, and looked genuinely defeated. Finally, he turned to Raskolnikov, stared straight at him, and said, loudly, decisively, "May I risk addressing you, sir, with a civil conversation? Because although your appearance does not exactly inspire confidence, my experience tells me you are educated and not accustomed to drink. I have always respected education when joined with real feeling, and for the record, I hold the rank of titular councillor. Marmeladov, titular councillor. I ask you directly, have you been in government service?" "No," Raskolnikov said, startled by the man's grand language and by being singled out. "I'm studying." "A student, then, or formerly a student," the clerk exclaimed, as if he'd solved a puzzle. "Just what I thought. I have experience, sir, immense experience." He tapped his forehead approvingly. "You've studied, you've been near learning, but allow me." He stood, swayed, picked up his jug and glass, and slid onto the bench beside Raskolnikov, turned toward him at an angle. He was drunk, but he spoke smoothly and with confidence, only occasionally losing the thread and dragging his words. "Sir," he began with almost ceremonial seriousness, "poverty is not a vice, true, but drunkenness is not a virtue. also true. Yet beggary, sir, beggary is a vice. In poverty you can still keep some dignity. In beggary you cannot. A beggar isn't driven out with a stick, he's swept out with a broom. The humiliation is the point, and it's deserved, because the beggar humiliates himself first. That's why the tavern exists. A month ago, Mr. Lebeziatnikov beat my wife. And my wife is not like me. Do you understand? Let me ask you something. Have you ever slept on a hay barge on the Neva? No, Raskolnikov said. What are you talking about? I've just come from one. 5th night in a row. He poured himself a drink, threw it back and paused. Bits of hay clung to his clothes and his hair. It was easy to believe he hadn't washed or changed in 5 days. His hands were especially filthy, fat, red, nails black with grime. His monologue stirred the room. The boys behind the counter snickered. The tavern owner came down and sat to listen, yawning like this was familiar entertainment. She read a physiology book someone lent her. That was most of her schooling. Then he asked Raskolnikov quietly but pointedly, could a respectable poor girl earn anything by honest work? Not enough to live, not enough to feed children. The little ones were hungry. Katerina Ivanovna raged. Sonia asked if she really had to do that. At 6 o'clock, Sonia left. At 9, she returned and placed 30 rubles on the table without speaking, without looking at anyone. Then she covered her face and lay down trembling. And I lay there drunk, Marmeladov said, just as before. He explained what followed. Sonia took the yellow ticket. She couldn't live with them anymore. She visited after dark. She gave what she could. She lived in a partitioned corner of a room with the Kapanaumovs, a poor family. Then came the brief miracle. Marmeladov begged his former superior and was taken back into service. The family acted as if paradise had returned. Coffee, cream, a uniform, a real dinner. Katerina Ivanovna even bragged to the landlady as if he'd been honored publicly, whether or not it was true. 6 days ago, he brought home his first full earnings. She called him her poppet. He tried to smile as he told it, but his chin started to twitch. Then his face shifted. 5 days ago, he said, suddenly sharp. The very next evening after all those dreams, I stole the key to her box like a thief, took what was left of my wages, and disappeared. And here I am, 5th day away. I've ruined everything. My uniform is lying in a tavern on the Egyptian bridge. I traded it for these clothes. It's the end. He laughed, looking at Raskolnikov with forced bravado. This morning I went to see Sonia. I went to ask her for a little money to steady myself. Someone in the room roared with laughter. This very drink was bought with her money, Marmeladov said. 30 kopecks, her last. She said nothing. She only looked at me. And that look hurts more than blame, because she doesn't condemn me. She just suffers. He began to rant, half sermon, half confession, about suffering, pity, judgment, forgiveness, about God receiving even the drunkards and the shamed. He ended in exhaustion, collapsing onto the bench, staring into nothing. The room laughed again. The tavern keeper cursed. Marmeladov suddenly turned to Raskolnikov. Come with me, he said. I'm going home. Time I did. Raskolnikov had wanted to leave for a while. Still, he stood and helped him. Marmeladov leaned heavily on him as they walked. As they neared the building, Marmeladov grew quieter and more frightened. It's not the beating I fear, he muttered. Let her pull my hair, that's nothing. It's her eyes I fear, her cheeks, how red they get, her breathing. Have you heard how people with that illness breathe when they're upset? And the children crying. If Sonia hasn't brought food. They climbed higher. The stairs darkened. It was nearly 11. Summer in Petersburg never fully becomes night, but the top of the building was already swallowed in darkness. At the very top, a grimy door stood open. Inside was a miserable room, lit by a stub of candle, fully visible from the entrance. Rags everywhere, children's clothes scattered, a sheet hung as a divider for what was probably a bed. 2 chairs, a torn sofa, a bare wooden table, a smoky candle in an iron holder. Their room was almost a hallway. Other people's rooms opened off it, and from inside came shouting, laughter, tobacco smoke, card games. Katerina Ivanovna was pacing, hands pressed to her chest. She was tall, slim, once graceful, now terribly thin. Her dark hair was still beautiful, but her face was feverish. Flushed cheeks, glittering eyes, dry lips, breathing in broken gasps. The air was foul, but she hadn't opened the window. She coughed, but didn't close the door to the smoky rooms. One child slept curled on the floor, head against the sofa. A boy cried in the corner, shaking, likely just beaten. A thin girl of 9 stood beside him, trying to calm him, one bony arm around his neck. Her big dark eyes watched their mother with fear. Marmeladov didn't even step into the room. He dropped to his knees in the doorway, pushing Raskolnikov forward. Katerina Ivanovna finally looked up, saw a stranger, barely registered him, then saw her husband on his knees. She screamed, "He's back! The criminal! The monster! Where's the money? What's in your pockets? Your clothes? Where are your clothes? Where is the money? Speak!" She searched him. He held up his arms obediently. There was nothing. In a fury, she grabbed his hair and dragged him into the room. He crawled on his knees, helping her pull him. "This is a consolation to me," he shouted, shaking as she yanked him. "It doesn't hurt. It's a consolation, sir." The sleeping child woke and began to cry. The boy screamed in terror. The older girl trembled. "He drank it all," Katerina Ivanovna screamed. "He drank everything, and the children are hungry." Then she turned on Raskolnikov. "You, from the tavern, drinking with him, get out!" Raskolnikov hurried away without speaking. The inner door opened wider, and curious faces leaned in, men with pipes and cigarettes, half-dressed bodies, laughing. Amalia Lipovexul herself forced her way through the crowd, shrieking abuse, threatening to throw them out the next day. As Raskolnikov slipped out, he quickly reached into his pocket, gathered the small coins he'd gotten back in change at the tavern, and placed them on the windowsill, unseen. On the stairs, he immediately regretted it. "What a stupid thing I've done," he thought. "They have Sonia, and I need it myself." But he knew he couldn't take it back now. He wouldn't, even if he could. So he waved the thought away and went home. "Sonia needs pomade too," he muttered, laughing bitterly. "That kind of smartness costs money." Then his mind turned colder. And what if she fails today? There's always risk in that work. And tomorrow they'd all starve, except for my money. Hurrah for Sonia. What a mine they found. He fell into thought. Then suddenly he stopped. "And what if I'm wrong?" he said aloud. "What if man isn't really a scoundrel, man in general, the whole human race? Then everything else is just prejudice, artificial fear. There are no barriers, and it's all as it should be." Like this video and subscribe to Translated Works for Part 1, Chapter 3 of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky.